What if your walls weren't made of brick, but of stone carved by rivers older than time? In the canyon depths, the sun lingers on cliff tops while shadows cool the valley floor. Echoes carry through stone corridors. Water hides in secret channels, and every breath feels ancient. Here, tribes have learned to live where beauty is vast, but survival is unforgiving, binding their lives to the rock, the river, and the stories that endure. This is the world of the canyon tribes. Havasupai. Deep within the labyrinth of the Grand Canyon lies a hidden world, carved by turquoise waters and guarded by towering walls of red stone. Here dwell the Havasupai, a people whose name means the people of the blue-green water. For centuries, they have called this secret valley home, far from the deserts above and the endless horizons that stretch beyond the rim. The canyon itself has been their fortress and their sanctuary, sheltering them from the world while shaping the rhythm of their lives. The land is beautiful, but merciless. Sheer cliffs rise in impossible heights, cutting the community off from easy passage. The river, though life-giving, can swell into a torrent, destroying the paths that connect them to the outside. Summer heat burns the canyon floor, while winter shadows leave it cold and silent. To live here meant learning the hidden language of stone and water. The Havasupai grew corn, beans, and melons in the narrow floodplains, carrying on traditions of farming in a land where agriculture should not have been possible. In the shade of the canyon walls, their fields became green islands against the barren desert. Yet survival was never simple. The outside world pressed closer with every passing century. As settlers, miners, and explorers claimed lands around the canyon, the Havasupai's territory was reduced to a fraction of what it once was. Their ancestral domain, once stretching across plateaus and valleys, was narrowed to the deep gorge where the blue waters flowed. What for others seemed like a prison of stone became for them the last refuge of identity. They endured, not by abandoning the canyon, but by drawing ever deeper into its protection. Through struggle, the Havasupai became inseparable from the place itself. Their songs and stories speak of the turquoise falls that descend in clouds of mist, of the red cliffs that glow with fire at sunset, and of the sacred trust to care for the waters that sustain them. The canyon is not merely a backdrop to their lives, but a living being, bound to their spirit. Tarahumara. High in the mountains of northern Mexico, the earth splits open into vast gorges and endless ravines. This is the Copper Canyon, a land deeper and broader than the Grand Canyon, a labyrinth of stone where rivers gleam far below and pine forests cling to the ridges above. Within this dramatic landscape live the Tarahumara, or Raramuri, whose name means the runners on foot. For centuries, they have called these canyons home, shaping their lives around the land's sheer walls and unforgiving heights. The Copper Canyon is a place of breathtaking beauty and relentless challenge. Sunlight struggles to reach the valley floor, while narrow paths wind like threads along cliffs that drop into shadow. The Tarahumara learned to survive where others could not, carving terraces into the mountainsides to grow corn and beans, guiding goats across rocky slopes, and seeking shelter in caves and stone dwellings built against the canyon walls. In this realm of extremes, where cold mountain air meets searing heat in the depths below, survival became an art of endurance. But endurance was always tested. When foreign powers arrived, seeking to control lands and resources, the Tarahumara retreated deeper into the canyons, abandoning open valleys for hidden refugees. The canyon became both shield and challenge, protecting them from conquest, while demanding all their strength to endure its steep terrain and scarce resources. To live here meant to climb, to descend, to walk for days between scattered settlements. The hardships of the land forged a people whose resilience became legendary. The Tarahumara are bound to their canyons through movement. Their ancient reputation as tireless runners was not born from sport, but from necessity. Paths between villages required journeys across impossible distances, through heat and dust, over stone and slope. Running became more than survival. It was woven into ceremony, into ritual, into the rhythm of life itself. The land demanded strength, and they answered with endurance that became their identity. Berber Canyon communities. In the heart of Morocco, where the Atlas Mountains fall away into narrow gorges and winding valleys, lie hidden communities that have endured for centuries. Here, the Berber people, the Amazigh, carved their lives from stone and earth, building villages that cling to cliff sides and nestle deep within canyons shaped by time. The ochre walls of their homes blend seamlessly with the rock, as if the land itself gave rise to them. These valleys, carved by rivers and framed by towering peaks, became sanctuaries of survival, where the Berber spirit has endured against every trial. The canyons of Morocco are beautiful but demanding. Winter snow melts from the mountains, feeding rivers that cut deep through the land, yet water remains scarce, and summers scorch the earth until only the hardiest crops survive. Terraced fields rise in steps along the valley walls, where wheat, barley, and olives grow against all odds. Life here has always been a balance between abundance and scarcity, where one season's gift may turn into the next season's hardship. For the Berbers, these valleys were both protection and prison, offering safety from invaders while isolating them in a land of extremes. Conflict came with time. Armies swept across North Africa, from Romans to Arabs to dynasties that sought control over mountain and desert alike. Yet the canyon strongholds of the Berbers were difficult to conquer. Their stone villages overlooked winding passes. Their deep valleys concealed them from the sight of armies. When the outside world pressed in, the Berbers retreated deeper into gorges where the walls rose like fortresses, and there they preserved their language, their customs, and their freedom. The climax of their story lies in resilience. Across centuries of shifting empires, these canyon communities remained steadfast. Their kasbahs of clay and stone rose like crowns above the valleys, symbols of both strength and endurance. Songs and stories carried through generations, echoing against canyon walls where the voice of the ancestors still lingers. The valleys became more than shelter. They became guardians of a culture that refused to fade. Today, the Berber presence still shapes Morocco's hidden canyons. Their homes of earth and stone remain bound to the land, their terraces still climbing the cliffs, their spirit woven into the rivers that carved their world. In the shadow of the Atlas, the canyon dwellings stand as living monuments, proof that even in the harshest and most remote valleys, people can not only survive, but create a legacy as enduring as the mountains themselves. Amhara Gorge dwellers. In the highlands of Ethiopia, where the land fractures into vast abysses and rivers carve their way through stone, the Amhara have built their lives upon the edge of gorges as deep as the sky itself. The Blue Nile has split the earth into a labyrinth of cliffs and valleys, a land both majestic and unforgiving, Villages cling to the ridges above, while hidden paths descend into the shadows below. For centuries, the Amhara people have called these dramatic landscapes home, shaping their history in a land where survival means living with the gorge rather than against it. The land is breathtaking, yet merciless. The gorges are carved with walls so steep that travel demands strength and patience. The descent to the river can take hours, the return an even greater burden, with water and harvests carried upon the back. Seasons rule with intensity. Rains transform the valleys into rivers of life, while drought turns them into silent scars of dust and stone. To endure here, the Amhara carved terraces into mountainsides, harnessing narrow strips of soil to grow teff, barley, and sorghum. Their fields rise like steps into the sky, each terrace a mark of resilience against gravity and time. Conflict has long shaped this land. Invaders sought to cross the highlands, but the gorges stood as natural fortresses, protecting the Amhara from conquest as surely as any army. The cliffs became walls, the rivers moats, the valleys labyrinths that only those born to them could navigate. Yet the same fortresses that protected also confined, isolating villages from one another and making every journey a test of endurance. The gorge demanded strength not only in battle, but in the daily struggle for food, water, and connection. From this struggle rises the heart of the Amhara spirit. Faith and tradition echo in the highland churches, hewn from stone, their chants carried across the canyons by the wind. Stories of ancestors, kings and warriors linger in the cliffs, where echoes seem to speak the memory of the land itself. The gorge is not only a setting for survival, but a sacred space, a reminder of both the fragility and the endurance of life. The climax of their story lies in persistence. For generations, the Amhara gorge dwellers have lived where stone and sky meet, their culture shaped by the hardships and beauty of the land. They remain tied to their valleys, bound to the earth by a history as deep as the gorges themselves. In Ethiopia's highlands, the Amhara endure, their presence carved into the cliffs like an eternal mark upon the land. Hopi, high on the mesas of Arizona, where desert winds carve the land into deep valleys and canyons, the Hopi people have endured for centuries. Their stone villages rise above the vast emptiness, looking out across lands of shifting sand and eroded cliffs. These are among the oldest continually inhabited settlements in North America, perched upon the edges of canyons where survival has always demanded patience, endurance, and reverence for the land. The Hopi story is bound to this landscape, a world both harsh and sacred, where every rock and shadow holds meaning. The land itself is a test. Rain is rare, rivers are fleeting, and the soil must be coaxed to yield its crops. Yet within the canyons and valleys, the Hopi created terraces where corn, beans, and squash could grow. They dug deep into the secrets of dry farming, learning to plant where the earth could catch the scarce rains. The cliffs offered protection, their stone walls guarding villages from the desert below. But they also demanded long climbs, isolating the people upon their high mesas. To live here was to live in balance, with a land that gave little and asked much. Conflict came with time, not only from the land itself, but from outsiders who sought to shape the destiny of the Hopi. Waves of pressure, from neighboring peoples to colonial powers, pressed upon their mesas. Yet the Hopi withdrew upward into their strongholds above the canyons, where stone villages could not easily be reached. Their survival was a story of retreat into the heights, of holding to tradition when change threatened to erase it. The canyons below bore witness to these struggles, their silence carrying the weight of resistance. The climax of their story is not in conquest, but in endurance. The Hopi remain, their dances still performed upon stone plazas, their prayers still rising into the desert sky. Their villages overlook the canyons as they have for centuries, silent guardians of a culture that has weathered every storm of history. The valleys below still provide the life-giving fields, while the mesas above stand as eternal watchtowers of resilience. In the deep canyons and high mesas of Arizona, the Hopi continue to embody the strength of a people who have lived in harmony with one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. Their story is not only survival, but a lesson in patience, endurance, and devotion to the land itself. Bedouin in Wadi Rum. In the south of Jordan, the desert opens into a vast wilderness of stone and sand, where cliffs rise like fortresses and valleys stretch into infinity. This is Wadi Rum, a place of towering sandstone walls and deep canyons carved by wind and time. It is here, among the silent gorges and endless dunes, that the Bedouin have lived for centuries. Their presence is etched into the landscape like the petroglyphs carved upon the rock, a story of survival and belonging in one of the most dramatic deserts on Earth. The land is both awe-inspiring and merciless. The canyons of Wadi Rum narrow into shadowed corridors, their walls glowing red at dawn and dusk. By day, the sun scorches the valley floor, and by night, the cold settles over the desert with sharp clarity. Water is scarce, hidden in springs and cisterns deep within the rock. For the Bedouin, survival meant learning the secret paths, the hidden wells, the places where shade and shelter could be found. Camels carried them across the valleys, and the canyons became their home, their refuge, and their guide. Yet life here was never without conflict. The desert offered little, and its silence often concealed danger. Tribes moved across the canyons in search of pasture and water, competing for the scarce lifelines that allowed survival. In later centuries, empires and armies crossed these valleys, leaving traces of conquest upon the land. But the Bedouin endured, guided by their knowledge of the desert's secrets. Wadi Rum, with its maze of cliffs and gorges, became not only a dwelling, but a fortress of identity. The climax of their story is woven into resilience. The Bedouin transformed hardship into strength, building a culture shaped by honor, endurance, and the rhythm of the desert itself. Poetry and song echoed through the canyons, telling of journeys, battles, and love beneath the stars. The sandstone walls carried their stories, while the silence of the desert became the canvas for their memory. To live in Wadi Rum was to belong to it, to carry its vastness within the heart. Today, Wadi Rum remains a place of wonder, its canyons and valleys as timeless as the stars above. And within this land, the Bedouin story endures, a testament to the strength of those who learn to thrive in silence, to find life where the earth seems bare, and to carry forward the spirit of the desert through every shifting shadow of stone and sand. Ute. In the heart of the American West, where mountains break into deep canyons and high plateaus fall away into winding valleys, the Ute people carved their story into the land. From the peaks of the Rockies to the canyons of Utah and Colorado, their homeland stretched across some of the most dramatic terrain in North America. Here, where rivers cut through stone and desert meets forest, the Ute lived for generations, their movements following the seasons, their survival bound to the vastness of the land and the depths of its gorges. The canyons of the Ute world are both beautiful and unforgiving. Red sandstone walls tower above shadowed corridors, rivers twist between sheer cliffs, and the sun burns the desert floor by day, before cold sweeps in by night. Life here required balance, hunting deer and elk in the mountains, fishing streams that cut through valleys, gathering roots and berries in hidden groves. In winter, snow pressed down upon the highlands, and the people descended into the shelter of the canyons. In summer, they returned to the heights, following the rhythms of a land both harsh and generous. Conflict shaped their story as much as the land itself. The Ute defended their home from rivals who sought control of the valleys and rivers, their warriors moving swiftly across terrain that others feared. When foreign powers arrived, the pressures multiplied. Explorers and settlers entered their homeland, claiming rivers and fertile canyon floors. The deep valleys that once gave refuge became borders, confining a people whose lives had always followed the open land. Yet even in the face of these struggles, the Ute held fast to their connection with the canyons, mountains, and rivers that had shaped them. The climax of their story rises in resilience. Songs and ceremonies tied them to the land, carrying forward the memory of ancestors who walked the same canyon floors and looked upon the same cliffs at dawn. Their spiritual bond to the earth was not broken by hardship, but strengthened by it, woven into every ridge and river that defined their world. The canyons became not only a place of survival, but a living memory, each stone carrying the echo of their past. Today, the story of the Ute remains bound to the landscapes of the West. Their heritage endures in the valleys and canyons where their ancestors walked, a reminder that survival is not only measured in strength, but in the ability to remain rooted to the earth. In the shadows of stone cliffs and in the depths of winding gorges, the Ute spirit continues to endure, as timeless as the land itself. Zuni. In the deserts of the American Southwest, where mesas rise like islands above a sea of stone, the Zuni people built their world among valleys and canyons, carved by time. Their homeland lies where New Mexico's red earth meets the wide horizon, a place where rivers run shallow and the land seems silent, yet carries the memory of countless generations. Here, the Zuni have endured for centuries, their villages standing as some of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements in North America, anchored to the canyons and valleys that both sheltered and challenged them. The land is demanding and precise. Rain falls rarely, yet when it comes, it gathers in flash floods that carve the canyon floors. The Zuni learned to meet this challenge with ingenuity. They built terraced fields and irrigation channels. The canyons became gardens of survival, their walls holding the echoes of labor and prayer. Above, stone houses rose in clusters, watching over the valleys below like guardians of the desert. Every harvest, every ritual, every act of endurance tied them more deeply to the rhythms of the land. Conflict came from without as much as within. Neighbors and invaders moved across the southwest, pressing upon the Zuni homeland. Later, when explorers and settlers arrived, they sought to shape the valleys to their own vision, challenging the ancient ways that had sustained the people for generations. Yet the isolation of the Zuni villages, tucked among mesas and canyons, gave them protection. Their stone walls stood firm, and their culture endured through the cycles of pressure and resistance. The canyons themselves became allies, guarding a people who refused to be uprooted. The climax of their story lies in the resilience of identity. The Zuni did not simply survive in the harsh desert canyons. They built a thriving spiritual world that infused every corner of the land. Their rituals, dances, and sacred traditions spoke to the forces of nature, honoring the spirits of rain, river, and earth. The canyons were not silent. They were living places, filled with voices carried on the wind and footsteps pressed into the sand. The Zuni's strength came not from dominating the land, but from living in harmony with it. Navajo. Across the deserts and canyons of the American Southwest stretches the homeland of the Navajo, the Diné, whose story is written into stone and sky. From Monument Valley's towers of red rock to the deep gorges carved by the San Juan and Little Colorado rivers, this is a land of shadows and silence where mesas rise like ancient guardians and canyons twist into endless passageways. For centuries, the Navajo have lived within these valleys, shaping their world around the stone, the river, and the endless desert horizon. The land is unforgiving, yet full of quiet power. Summers burn the canyons with relentless heat, while winters bring biting winds that sweep across the high desert. Water is scarce, hidden in springs, or gathered in precious pools after summer rains. To survive here, the Navajo moved with the land, herding sheep and goats along canyon floors, planting corn and beans in the sandy soil, and using the stone itself to build shelters against the wind. The canyons became both home and shield, offering protection from the vast emptiness that surrounded them. Conflict soon marked the Navajo story. Pressures from neighboring peoples and the arrival of foreign powers brought struggle into their valleys. In the 17th and 18th centuries, raids and battles spread across the desert canyons, testing their endurance. Later, with the advance of settlers and soldiers, the Navajo faced one of the darkest chapters of their history. Driven from their canyon homes during the long walk, they were forced across the desert, enduring hunger, hardship, and exile. The canyons that had once been their sanctuary became empty, their silence filled with loss